Friday, 21st February, 2020. Just before sunrise, Manchester Airport was waking up. Families rushed through the terminal doors and men in high-vis jackets waved travelers into valet bays. Keys exchanged and nothing out of place. But as the planes lifted from the runway, something else was moving too. Weeks later, investigators would realize it wasn't a parking mix-up. It was the beginning of a network that would reach far beyond Manchester. Years later, on a cold morning in October 2024, the quiet streets of Oldham stirred again. In the corner of an old mill in Oldham, cars sat half dismantled under the glare of strip lights. It looked like any other garage, until you saw the shells lined against the wall, waiting for their turn. The faces were different, but the rhythm was the same. They called themselves 5-0, and by the time most of the city woke up, their operation was already underway. This is the story of the Manchester Airport valet scam, and how a dismantled empire quietly came back to life with more precision and power. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. Manchester Airport, early 2020. The first reports came in quietly, a handful of travelers returning from holidays to find their cars missing. At first, airport staff believed it was an internal mix-up. But within days, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Dozens of vehicles, all left with off-site valet companies, had vanished without a trace. The operation was simple, and that was its strength. Fake valet firms appeared online, offering cheaper parking than the official airport services. Their websites were convincing, full of logos, confirmation emails, and testimonials copied from legitimate companies. At the terminal, their employees looked the part too. High-vis jackets, branded lanyards, and even printed paperwork bearing the airport's name. They met customers at drop-off zones, took the keys, and drove the vehicles away in full view of CCTV. Nothing about it looked suspicious. What victims didn't know was that the cars were never parked off-site. Within minutes, they were being redirected through side roads toward Greater Manchester's industrial outskirts, places like Oldham, Chadderton, and Radcliffe. These areas, dotted with shuttered mills and unit yards, would later become central to one of the region's largest car theft investigations. The stolen vehicles weren't random either. Investigators later found clear targeting: high-end models, easy to resell or strip for parts, Range Rovers, BMWs, Audis, Porsches, and Mercedes. Many were stolen to order, based on specific colors or trim levels requested by buyers overseas. Once off the airport grounds, each car was taken to a temporary holding unit, and what happened there will be revealed in a few minutes. By the time owners landed back in the UK and called to check on their vehicles, the cars were already dismantled or loaded for transport. Police noted how professional the execution was. No alarms and no traces left behind. It wasn't joyriding or opportunistic theft. It was logistics. The first official link between the missing airport vehicles and Manchester's organised crime groups would only emerge months later. We will talk about this in a few minutes. By then, the network was already expanding, and what began as a parking service had turned into a multi-million-pound export line. The investigation into Manchester's missing airport cars soon revealed a far more intricate network than anyone expected. When police traced the first recovered vehicle back to an industrial unit in Oldham, they uncovered the name that would later anchor the entire operation: Asif Hussain. On paper, Hussain appeared to be a businessman. His company, German Automotive 365 Limited, was registered to a modest address and listed as a car parts supplier. During the pandemic, it had even received a government bounce-back loan, but we will talk about this later in this video. To detectives, the paperwork was little more than camouflage. Instead, it linked directly to a stream of stolen vehicles that were being dismantled and prepared for export. Working alongside him was Hadir Ali, who managed day-to-day operations from the garages and mill units the group occupied. His name appeared on tenancy agreements for several of the sites, among them a space at Stockfield Mill in Chadderton. There, investigators later found stripped Land Rovers, cloned parts, and fragments of chassis numbers ground away to hide their origin. The wider team ran like a production line. Sajid Jungharia was connected to vehicle pickups, often seen moving freshly stolen cars between units, while Tayyub Hasnain handled logistics within Greater Manchester, sourcing premises, moving equipment, and ensuring each site stayed one step ahead of police interest. Ibraz Shafiq, meanwhile, kept the money moving. We will discuss his key role in the whole operation in a few minutes. When detectives began combing through phones seized from the group, the pattern became clear. Messages referenced vehicles as shopping lists, specific models, colors, and years requested by buyers. Calls placed the same devices near theft scenes across Manchester and Cheshire, and when customs data was reviewed, it revealed a fake freight business, KG Logistics, used to book containers under cloned company identities. By the time investigators mapped it all together, the scale was undeniable. What began with a handful of stolen airport cars had grown into a network of mills, storage units, and exporters. The first real break in the case came not from a tip-off or confession, but from technology quietly watching the roads. Greater Manchester Police's automatic number plate recognition system began flagging vehicles that had been reported missing from the airport's valet services. Within days, several of those same registration numbers appeared again, this time captured on cameras along routes leading to Chadderton and Radcliffe. Both areas were already familiar to investigators. They had long been associated with small-scale chop shops, garages that stripped down stolen cars before police could trace them. The locations were deliberately chosen: dense clusters of units, narrow access roads, and plenty of noise from nearby workshops to mask the sound of tools cutting through metal. Surveillance teams were deployed, where detectives soon noticed a pattern. By day, the shutters stayed down, sometimes for weeks at a time. Then late at night, the lights flickered on. Vans pulled up to the doors, and cars, some still warm from the road, were driven inside, and by morning nothing was left. When officers later entered one of the garages under warrant, the precision of the operation was clear. Cars were dismantled within hours. Number plates and tracking devices were already discarded. Engines had been tagged, labeled with shipping codes, and wrapped for export. Even the shells, the bare frames of once new vehicles, were accounted for, crushed into scrap before sunrise to erase their origins. 3 separate warehouses were soon identified as part of the same pattern, one in Stockfield Mill, another on an industrial estate near Radcliffe, and a third linked to storage space rented under false names. Each time police traced the tenancy records or utility accounts, the trail circled back to the same cluster of men, all using aliases, shared phones, and false documents. It was the first time investigators could see the network structure from end to end. What had started as a mystery at Manchester Airport was now being mapped across the industrial heart of Greater Manchester, and every road pointed back to Asif Hussein's crew. By early 2021, months of surveillance, phone analysis, and financial tracing had brought the investigation to its breaking point. Detectives from Greater Manchester Police's Vehicle Interference Unit and the Regional Organised Crime Unit coordinated a series of dawn operations, a sweep designed to strike multiple sites at once and prevent anyone from warning the others. The first doors went in just after 5 a.m. in Oldham, followed by simultaneous entries at industrial estates in Wigan and Stockport. Officers moved quickly, supported by traffic and tactical teams. What they found behind the shutters was exactly what investigators had been watching unfold for months: a production line of stolen prestige cars halfway through their final transformation. Inside the units, the floors were scattered with vehicle shells and branded components. Range Rovers, Porsche Cayennes, and Jaguars, all reduced to bare frames and tagged engines. Some parts still had shipping labels attached, ready for container loading. Nearby computers contained freight paperwork and customs declarations linked to a string of fake export firms. By that point, the network had already sent 11 containers out of the country. 3 of them had been intercepted through international cooperation, one at Seaforth Dock in Merseyside, another in Istanbul, and a third in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. Each one carried dismantled luxury cars concealed among declared used parts. Police overseas had returned the containers unopened, preserving the evidence intact. Phones seized during the raids confirmed the group's coordination. We will talk about these vital discoveries in a few minutes. Within days, the principal figures were in custody. Asif Hussain was arrested in Oldham. His associates, Hadir Ali, Sajid Jangharia, Tayyub Hasnain, and Ibraz Shafiq, were detained in coordinated follow-up operations across Greater Manchester. The arrests brought an end to one of the region's most profitable and highly organized vehicle theft networks, but the scale of its reach was still only beginning to emerge. When detectives finally seized the gang's phones, the messages painted a picture that went far beyond stolen cars. Among the talk of vehicles and logistics were repeated mentions of loans, funds coming in, and paperwork sorted. At first, officers assumed it was coded language, another layer of criminal shorthand. But when financial investigators began tracing the accounts, the truth was far more audacious. 2 companies stood out: German Automotive 365 Limited and Merck Car Breakers Limited. On paper, both appeared to be small automotive traders. In reality, neither had ever filed a tax return. Yet between them, they had claimed a combined £145,000 in COVID bounce-back loans, public money meant to keep struggling businesses afloat during the pandemic. The German Automotive 365 company had no employees, no invoices, and no trace of legitimate trade. But within a week of application, £50,000 had been paid into its account. Detectives later found the money was used to pay for transport vans, rent on the Chadderton and Radcliffe units, and initial container bookings for overseas shipping. Another £95,000 came from a firm linked to Ibraz Shafiq, the group's financial handler. He moved the funds between multiple personal and business accounts, masking the origin and mixing it with proceeds from car parts sold through online listings. The paper trail showed how bounce-back loan cash was quickly converted into operating capital, buying equipment, covering export costs, and washing profits under the guise of legitimate motor trade. When prosecutors presented the evidence in court, the scale of the deception became clear. The loans weren't a side scheme. They were the backbone of the operation, a financial lifeline that turned theft into enterprise. What made it even more striking was the timing. As businesses across the country struggled to survive, Hussein's network used taxpayer money to expand. The courtroom at Manchester Crown Court in January 2022 was silent as the scale of the case was finally laid out. Prosecutors detailed how the gang had stolen and dismantled more than 90 vehicles, with an estimated total value of around £3 million. Each car had been stripped, tagged, and shipped with military-like precision. The judge described the operation as industrial in scale. In his remarks, Judge Anthony Cross KC condemned the group for exploiting the government's COVID support scheme to bankroll organised crime. He ordered a formal inquiry into how the bounce-back loans were approved, calling the process a catastrophic failure of oversight. The loans, he said, had been intended to protect livelihoods, not fund the theft and export of British cars. As the sentences were handed down, detectives from GMP's Organised Crime Unit noted that the work was far from over. Evidence recovered from the gang's phones hinted at other garages still operating under the same banner. A name repeated in chat logs and invoices: the company. Asif Hussain received the longest sentence, 15 years in prison. Hadir Ali was sentenced to 11 years. Sajid Jungharia was given 10 years. Tayyub Hasnin was jailed for 5 years and 6 months, whereas Ibraz Shafiqa received 5 years. Even as the main figures were taken away, investigators believed branches of the same network were still active, dismantling cars, loading containers, and keeping a lucrative trade alive beyond Manchester's borders. In March 2025, Interpol's Operation Safe Wheels ran checkpoints across 12 West African countries, including Ghana, cross-checking vehicles against the Stolen Motor Vehicle database. The results confirmed what UK investigators had been seeing for years. British-plated luxury cars were entering West Africa by land and sea, laundered through paperwork and sold on to unwitting buyers. Ghanaian police publicly warned that some motorists could be driving stolen imports without knowing it. Elsewhere, the routes were just as clear. A Range Rover stolen from Harrogate was traced by its onboard tracker to Karachi, Pakistan, prompting a formal request for international assistance. In the same city, a Bentley Mulsanne taken in London was seized from a driveway in the Defence Housing Authority district. Forged plates were fitted, but its VIN told the story. In Southeast Asia, Operation Titanium linked UK finance fraud thefts to showrooms in Bangkok. 30 high-value cars worth about £6.5 million, including a Lamborghini Huracan Spider, Porsches and Mercedes, were recovered and shipped back to the UK. Closer to home, the export pipeline ran through British ports. Essex Police's Stolen Vehicle Intelligence Unit intercepted 60-plus containers in 2023, recovering around 240 vehicles valued at £13 million. Among them were a Ferrari and Range Rover Sport belonging to 2 Premier League footballers. Officers also found SUVs stacked on tyres and suspended by cargo straps inside boxes. From Ghana to Karachi, Bangkok to Thurrock, the pattern is the same. Stolen in the UK, disguised on paperwork, and loaded for markets hungry for prestige brands and scarce parts. But even with Hussein and his crew behind bars, the story didn't end there. Within months, whispers started to resurface again, but different men behind the wheels. By early 2023, Greater Manchester Police began hearing familiar echoes in their intelligence reports. Vehicles disappearing under near-identical circumstances, stolen to order, and dismantled in quiet industrial estates that felt all too familiar. The chatter pointed to a revival, one that investigators would soon label the return of the yard. This time, the network called itself 5-0. It wasn't a random nickname, but a deliberate reference to the slang term police themselves used, a taunt, and a statement that the trade never truly stopped. The men behind it were younger, less known to police. We will talk about them in a few minutes. Across Greater Manchester, copycat theft started appearing. High-end SUVs lifted from driveways, cloned key signals used to unlock vehicles silently, and the same kinds of storage units rented under fake names. When detectives began mapping the activity, the pattern matched Hussein's playbook almost line for line, from pickup routes to the choice of industrial estates. GMP responded with a new investigation, Operation Avispa, designed to dismantle what looked like a second-generation version of the original network. Surveillance teams spent months monitoring suspected units across the region. The findings were clear: 8 separate industrial sites, each carrying different company names, but all using the same stripping rigs, diagnostic scanners, and freight booking methods once tied to the old crew. This wasn't a resurgence born from coincidence, it was succession. And as detectives watched engines loaded into vans once again, one truth became clear: Manchester's stolen car empire had learned to survive its own downfall. At its center was Asif Matadar, a figure already known to police from earlier organised vehicle theft inquiries. He wasn't connected directly to Asif Hussein's jailed crew, but investigators noticed shared contacts, overlapping phone records, similar suppliers, and the same freight agents once used by the company. Matadar's network was built on distribution rather than hierarchy. Each man ran his own yard, feeding parts and cars into a wider chain. Shawaz Rehman operated one of the busiest chop shops in Oldham, a unit that stripped vehicles within hours of being stolen. Rehman was already on police radar for coercive control and violence offences, with investigations running parallel to the theft case. Detectives later linked his operation to at least 30 stolen cars. Imran Taj managed logistics, moving stripped components to exporters and scrap buyers. Zishan Ali and Mohammed Irfan handled the mechanical side, removing trackers, altering chassis numbers, and packaging engines for shipment. Their yards ran late into the night, echoing the same industrial precision seen years earlier under Hussein's group. Adam Elwood, one of the younger members, had a reputation for risk. While others stayed within the theft trade, he began branching out, investing the profits into drug supply and dangerous driving offences, using stolen vehicles as cover for transport and getaway runs. His name would appear repeatedly in later GMP briefings as a key crossover between vehicle crime and the city's street-level drug networks. Overseeing finances and coordination was James Hopkinson, whose connections stretched across several auto salvage companies in Greater Manchester. It was his accounts that linked the group's financial trail to older laundering patterns from the company. Together, these 7 men rebuilt the structure that once dominated Manchester's stolen car economy, not as a single warehouse, but as a network of yards. By mid-2024, months of covert surveillance followed, with unmarked teams monitoring industrial estates from dawn until well after midnight. Drones became one of the unit's most valuable tools, quietly hovering above suspected yards, capturing images of cars entering late at night and leaving stripped bare by morning. Investigators also deployed discreet tracker beacons on vehicles known to be at risk, high-value SUVs and saloons flagged by insurers and victims alike. Within hours of being stolen, many of those cars were tracked directly to the same set of yards police had under watch. Inside, the clues were unmistakable. Forensic teams later confirmed that the specialist dismantling tools recovered during searches, hydraulic spreaders, electronic reprogrammers, and VIN grinders, matched the make and wear patterns of those seized from the original company raids years earlier. Financial investigators traced money flowing from small garages in Manchester to repeat buyers in the UAE and Eastern Europe, mirroring the same export routes used by Hussein's network. Payments were disguised through legitimate-sounding accounts, auto parts, performance upgrades, logistics fees. But when customs agencies in those regions ran serial number checks, the trail led back to stolen UK vehicles. Recognizing the scope, GMP worked with the National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Service and Border Force to monitor outgoing freight containers. Intelligence sharing extended to ports in Essex, Merseyside, and the Midlands. It was there that customs data confirmed the worst. Export bookings had resumed, with vehicle components listed under false declarations for used mechanical parts. The confirmation was all detectives needed. This time, police wanted to end it before another generation of stolen cars disappeared overseas. At dawn on a cold morning in October 2024, Greater Manchester Police launched their most coordinated vehicle crime operation in years. After months of intelligence work under Operation Avispa, 8 simultaneous warrants were executed across Oldham, Stockport, Radcliffe, and Wigan. Just after 5 a.m., officers moved in. Tactical teams breached the first sites under warrant, backed by roads policing and the regional organised crime unit. Inside, they found the evidence they had been building towards for months. Rows of half-dismantled luxury cars, stripped dashboards, boxed engines, and cloned electronic modules stacked neatly on pallets. More than 90 vehicles or stripped assemblies were recovered across all locations. Evidence logs showed engines and transmissions wrapped in plastic, marked with destination initials for Turkey, the UAE, and West Africa. Nearby, computers stored shipping drafts listing parts. As forensic teams catalogued parts and chassis fragments, investigators seized phones, paperwork, and laptops containing the digital skeleton of the network. By midday, arrests were underway across Greater Manchester. Asif Matadar, Shiwaz Rehman, Imran Taj, Zishan Ali, Adam Elwood, Mohammed Irfan, and James Hopkinson were all detained under conspiracy to steal, handle, and export stolen goods. Each was taken to specialist custody suites for questioning as teams continued searches through the night. What began as a whisper of old habits had become a full-scale takedown. The 5-0 network, the second generation of Manchester's car theft empire, had been caught in the act just as their containers were being prepared for export. In October 2024, the case returned to Manchester Crown Court, where months of evidence, surveillance footage, and financial tracing were finally laid out in full. The defendants sat side by side as prosecutors described the overwhelming evidence. Judge Neil Usher told the court that what had been uncovered was a highly professional and organized enterprise, one that blended fraud, export crime, and precision planning. When sentencing began, the scale of individual involvement was made clear. Adam Elwood received 6 years, reflecting his additional convictions for drug offences and dangerous driving. Shiwaz Rehman was jailed for 4 years, 9 months. Imran Taj received 4 years. Zishan Ali was sentenced to 3 years, 9 months. Asif Matadar was given 3 years, 6 months. Mohammed Irfan received 3 years and James Hopkinson was handed 8 months, suspended for 18 months. Together, the group faced a combined total of 25 years imprisonment. What do you think about the cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of UK crime documentaries.